Are you looking for 3 great, simple woodworking projects that you can use as decorations around your home? Or quick and easy Halloween projects that you can make with scrap wood and sell for a high profit? If so, this is the video for you. So check out this step-by-step guide and let's get started. So when we're making these spooky cats, the first thing we're going to do is use our tape measure and our pencil to make the lines, and then use that speed square and circular saw to cut each piece of the fence picket to the correct size. The reason I use fence pickets is because they're cheap at the big box stores, and you can use them for a versatility of different projects. And with one fence picket, we're actually able to make all of the different sizes that we need for these cats. So what you're seeing here is we're using that speed square and pencil to strike the line, and then using that speed square as a straight edge so we can guide our circular saw. After we've cut these pieces of wood to size, what we're going to do is use our tape measure and find the center point of the fence picket. And then once we've found that center point, we're using the straight edge from the extra piece of fence picket to connect the corner of the line to the center point. So we're going to do the same exact thing on the second piece. And as you can see, we made a little bit greater of a distance for that center point because a bigger cat would have longer ears. So we're going to use that extra piece of wood right there as a straight edge to connect the center point to the corner as well. And this is going to give us the different size wood that we need to make the cats. So now what you're seeing is we're using that circular saw to cut to the center point. Now we're not going all the way because I didn't want to have intersecting blade marks on the pieces of wood. And so I used another tool on both pieces to get the cuts I wanted. So here you're seeing our oscillating tool, and we put a wood blade on there, and now what we're doing is just cutting that extra little piece of wood to make sure that we get clean cuts for the ears. So now you can see after we've used that oscillating tool, we get a nice clean cut for that triangle that's out, and now you can see that once we apply the black paint, that's going to give us the look of the cats. So now what we're doing is just applying the black paint. And for this project, these cats are going to be inside, so the type of paint that we're using is not necessarily as important, just making sure that you paint it black. But if you are going to use this project outside, make sure that you use the correct type of paint and or a type of sealant to make sure that it doesn't get exposed to the elements and that the wood stays painted and it doesn't start to rot. Now you can see we're going to use white acrylic paint to paint the eyes. So we went ahead and put the white paint on the little platform right there, and then we're going to use our paintbrush to freehand paint the eyes. Again, we're using this project inside, so the type of paint that we use isn't as important because it's not going to be exposed to the elements. But as you can see, we're just using that paintbrush and we're just painting the eyes directly onto the black paint. You can go online and look for templates, or you can just go ahead and freehand it. I'm not the best artist, but I was able to freehand these eyes relatively well, and so as you can see, it's not a super difficult project, and you can go ahead and paint on the eyes relatively quickly. One thing that I did find is that because my artistic ability is not the greatest, it was a little difficult to make sure that I painted the eyes to make sure they look really accurate like actual cat eyes, but it turned out really well, and this is something that you can definitely replicate on your own, or if you're a better artist than me, you can definitely get it to look just how you want it. And for anyone out there that has any good tips or tricks on how to paint a little more artistically, go ahead and leave a comment down below and let me know what method you would use. So now that we're finishing up the eyes, you can see that they're turning out relatively nice, and you can see how easy this project is. So here's the final product once it's in the corner, and you can see how the eyes look. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and get going with the ghosts. As you can see, we did the same thing. We use our tape measure, and then we use our straight edge, and that'll give us that line that we want to strike. And now that we've got the wood clamped down, we're going to go ahead and use our speed square as a straight edge so we can cut the wood with a circular saw. Again, fence pickets are perfect for this project because with one fence picket, I was able to actually make all 3 ghosts and the pumpkin that you're going to see here shortly. So there's the line for the second piece of wood. We just go ahead and slide it down. and then we're gonna use our same method. We're gonna clamp down the wood, use our speed square as a straight edge, and use that circular saw to rip that piece of wood. Now we're gonna go ahead and slide the wood down and just measure one more time to get that last ghost. And what you can see is we've got varying sizes, and you'll see how that project turned out at the end. So we go ahead and strike that line, and now you'll see that we've got the ghost on the left-hand side, and the smaller piece is gonna be that pumpkin. So now here on the top of the fence picket, we've got those 45-degree angles. So what I did was I went ahead and used that original fence picket and just traced the lines on the top so I could cut those off and have matching lines. So there's the two lines there, and you can see the lines that are on the top. We're gonna go ahead and use our circular saw to cut those off. So here you can see I'm using the 45 degree of that speed square, and that's gonna give us a nice straight edge to get accurate cuts. The nice thing about that is it turns out just like the other ones that we had on the original fence picket. So we've got matching lines and everything looks nice and uniform once everything's cut out. And now for the pumpkin, we're gonna do the same thing. The smaller piece of wood is underneath that longer piece. We just trace the line. And now you can see we're gonna have the same exact markings on that piece of wood right there. That'll be the pumpkin. So we're gonna go ahead and cut off those corners, and then we'll have all 4 pieces of wood. That'll give us the 3 ghosts and the 1 pumpkin. So now what we're doing is we're actually using the same technique that I've used in other videos. We're gonna go ahead and do the same process that we would use for if we were making the rustic look. So what we're doing is we're using a black base coat, and then with that black base coat, we're gonna go ahead and put the top coat on top of the black paint once it dries, and then we're gonna sand everything down. So you can see we don't have to have a super accurate black paint for the base coat. All you have to do is just make sure that it gets on there and covers the wood. So it's a very quick process. We're just putting that black paint on there, and then you'll see in the next step, we're gonna put the white paint on top for the ghosts and the orange paint for the pumpkin. And then once that paint all dries, we'll go ahead and sand it down. So now that we've got the black base coat on there, now we're just putting that white coat on top, and that's gonna be our top coat. And as you can see, we're just gradually putting that white paint on there. It doesn't need to be a perfect paint job because again, we're gonna be sanding that white paint down. But once that white paint gets on there, we let it dry, and then we're gonna sand it down, and it'll give us that rustic look for the ghosts. And now we're just applying that orange paint, and that's gonna be the pumpkin. So as you can see, we're just putting that paint on there, and then once it dries, then we'll move into the sanding phase. So now you're seeing we're using our orbital sander, and we're just gonna go ahead and run it over the white paint. Go ahead and take off some of the white paint on there on that top coat, and it gives it that rustic look. We did it with the white, and now we're gonna do the same exact thing with the orange paint. So now what I'm doing is I'm just using a pencil, and you can see I have my phone in my hand, and I just looked at a template online of what a ghost face kind of looks like. And now I'm just kind of freehanding it to try and get a look that I like for how the ghost faces should be. Very simple process, and you'll also notice that on that longest piece of wood there was a knot, so I decided to use that as part of one of the eyes. So now I'm using black acrylic paint, and what we're going to do is just use that black paint to make the eyes and the mouth for each ghost. As you can see, it's a very quick process, very simple, and very easy to replicate. One thing I would say is, if you're going to use this project outdoors, I would definitely put some type of sealant or some type of waterproof paint. That way if it rains or if you start getting the wood exposed to the elements, you don't have to worry about the paint getting messed up, and you don't have to worry about the wood rotting or having any situations that you don't want to happen to this project. So as you can see, painting the faces on the ghosts is very easy. It doesn't have to be a super artistic look because ghosts are relatively easy to paint. And I'm just going through very quickly, just adding the black paint, making the eyes and the mouth. And then for each ghost, they have a different facial expression. I kind of tried to get the look of the longer 2 pieces being the parents, and then the shorter piece being the child. So as you can see, I'm now using that black paint, and I'm covering over that knot that was in the wood, and I made that as one of the eyes. So you don't really notice the knot as much, and then we're just making the smiley face right there, and we get the ghost going. So as you can see, I wasn't sure if I wanted to have the stem of the pumpkin straight up and down or sideways, so I decided to just cut out a piece of scrap wood and then see how I liked it. So looking at this stem, that's how it would look straight up, or that's how it would look at an angle, and ultimately I decided I wanted to have the stem straight up just like that. So once I decided I wanted the stem straight up, I used some green acrylic paint, and I went ahead and put that next to the black paint. And then I decided I wanted to mix a little bit of the green paint with the black paint to give it a little bit darker of a color. And what you're going to see is I use this darker green on the sides just to fill in the paint on the wood. And then I decided to use a little bit lighter of a green color on the other portion, which you'll see here shortly. So now I'm just using the regular green paint. And again, this is just simple acrylic paint, but if you're going to use it outdoors, remember to use some type of paint that can withstand the elements. And now you're seeing I'm just painting the stem green, nothing crazy, a very simple project. And there's what the pumpkin looks like when it's straight up and down. So now what you can see is we're going to attach the stem to the pumpkin. All I did was use a little bit of wood glue, put it on top of the orange fence picket, and then attach the green stem to it. We removed a little bit of the glue squeeze out, and then we just let it dry. Alright, now what you can see is I actually decided to cut a little bit off of that smaller ghost. And the reason I did that is I wanted it to be shorter than the two longer pieces. I wanted to make it look like a family of ghosts, and so what you can see is it fits a little bit better than I made it shorter. So I went ahead and used my pencil and got the wood how I wanted it, and then just mark a line on each part of the ghost right there. And then when I attached everything, I went ahead and put some glue, and then put the smaller piece right there lined up, and that just made it fit a little bit nicer together. And then once it's all set up where I wanted it, I went ahead and used the 18 gauge brad nailer, and that's going to hold everything in place while the glue dries. Alright, and the same thing when attaching the pumpkin, just squeeze out some glue there, and then I went ahead and attached the pumpkin where I wanted it. And then once it's in a spot where I liked it, again just hit it with that 18 gauge brad nailer, and that's going to hold everything in place while the glue dries. And now you'll see this is what the final product looked like. Alright, now for the witch's hat, you can see the templates right there that I drew out, and I just used some scrap wood that I had laying around. And here we're going to use our jigsaw, and so we're going to grab our saw blade. And once we grab the blade that we want, we're just going to go ahead and put it in that jigsaw. So we're going to go ahead and use the release lever, and go ahead and slide that blade into place. And once we test to make sure everything's secure, we're going to go ahead and add the battery, make sure everything works. And now we're just going to go ahead and clamp the wood down and use that jigsaw to cut out the template that we drew on the extra wood. So now we're using the jigsaw, and as you can see, it doesn't have to be perfect, just as long as you're getting the rough shape that you want for the template, and then as you're cutting it out, make sure that it gets roughly about the size and the shape that you want for that witch's hat. So as you can see, we went ahead and just cut out different portions. We were using that jigsaw to cut out various pieces, and this makes it easier when we're cutting around the edges. Alright, so one more time clamping the wood down. We're going to go ahead and cut around that last rounded edge, and this is going to give us that final base that we want for the witch's hat. Now we're going to cut out the top of the witch's hat. So we're going to do the same exact thing that we did, just clamp the wood down, and then we're just going to use that jigsaw to follow along the line. And this is a very simple project, just cutting out everything with that jigsaw, and then using all the tools we have at our disposal. Again, remember when using a jigsaw, you don't have to do everything in one pass. Sometimes it's better to use the jigsaw and cut out a little bit at a time to make sure you're cutting around those rounded edges and make sure that you're getting all the cuts that you want. Alright, so now that we've got the base and the top of the hat done, we're going to go ahead and start painting. So as you can see, we're just applying that black paint. Again, this project right here for the hat is going to be indoors, so the type of paint's not as important. But just remember to get a good paint job on there, and then we are going to go ahead and use our sander once we're done. So now you can see the final paint. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use dowels to attach. So we're using 5/16 inch dowels, so we're using a 5/16 inch drill bit. Now we're using this Milescraft tool. This basically acts as a drill press to make sure we can get accurate straight up and down plunges on our drill. So all we do is just finger tighten that chuck right there on the tool, and then we're going to use our chuck key and make sure that the chuck is tight around that drill bit. And now once we know that it's tight, We're going to go ahead and use our drill, and we're going to insert that piece of the tool into the chuck on the drill, and we should have a relatively simple straight up and down drilling. Alright, so we've got a knot in the wood there, so we don't want to drill through that, so we moved where we're going to be drilling the dowels just a little bit to the side of the actual knot. And now we're just measuring exactly where we want to have the dowels inserted into the hat. We're not going to use wood glue because I wanted to make sure that once it's time to pack up these decorations, we can easily disassemble it. So I just marked right where the top hat is going to go on the base, and then we're using our punch here to make sure that we go ahead and drill exactly where we want to within the 2 lines that we just used our pencil to scribe. And those are the lines, and that's exactly where we're going to put it. So now you can see we're using that Miles Craft tool to get accurate plunges, and we can drill exactly where we want to put those dowels. So now we take the dowels, and again, we're not going to use wood glue because we don't want this to be a permanent thing. We want to be able to disassemble this project very easily. So we're just going to tap those dowels in with a hammer, and now you can see where we're going to attach the top of the hat. So now we're just going to line up the top of the hat where we want to actually attach the dowels, and we're just going to make a small mark with our pencil right there where the dowels are. And again, we're going to be sanding this down, and so we don't necessarily have to be so concerned about the little pencil marks because those are going to come right off once we sand everything down. So now you can see the guidelines where we're going to drill for the dowel. And we're going to go ahead and use scrap wood on the sides because this table acts as a vise. I didn't want the wood to mess up the top of the hat when it squeezes together, so I used those pieces of scrap wood. And now we go ahead and use that tool again to get the nice plunge drill holes. And we're going to go ahead and do that on both sides. And once we do that, that'll give us the proper holes for the dowels. Alright, and you can see the holes for the dowels right there. So now all we have to do is just line up the holes with the dowels and just put it together, and that project goes together nicely. So the next thing I wanted to do was add an orange stripe to the top of the witch's hat. So all I did was got some painter's tape and just went ahead and masked it off so that I could just do a quick layer of orange paint, and then that'll work out just nice. So now we're just getting that quick layer of orange paint on there. And again, we're going to sand this down so you don't have to get the best orange paint job on there. Just go ahead and get the paint on there so it's nice and covered, and then after it's dry, we're going to go ahead and hit it with that orbital sander. So as you can see, the orange looks nice. We're just going to go ahead and remove the dowels, and now we're going to use that orbital sander to take down some of the paint, and it'll give it a little bit of that worn look. So you'll see some of the wood grain on there, and it'll look really nice once we get done. So now we're just using that orbital sander on the top of the hat as well. We're going to take down some of the paint and give it that nice worn look. And now we're just going to go ahead and put the dowels back in and put the hat back together. And there it is. So as you can see, after we sanded it, it gave it that kind of worn down rustic look, and that's exactly what we were going for. Remember, this project is super easy, and it's nice because you can use scrap wood that you have laying around, and it makes nice Halloween decorations. You can either sell these products for high margin because they're cheap wood that you used as scraps, or you can use them for decorations around your home. So I hope this helped.